So first of all, how we define success, how we measure success, is a direct reflection of our values. And then secondly, right along with that, is that how we define success has a direct impact on our happiness. And then third is that applying spiritual principles to our lives must, I say again, must result in success. We don't have to, we've been told ever since we were very small about success. You got to get good grades, right? You got to excel at this. You got to be good at that. You got to get good SAT scores. You got to get into the right school. Everywhere we turn on the job, there are performance evaluations, promotions, merit awards, just all kinds of ways that we are being held to standards that some people get mixed up in their mind as saying, I punch these tickets and then I'm successful. And so, based on how you define success, really is a statement to the world about what you value. So if to you success is wealth, then money is really, really important to you. And unfortunately, oftentimes people who are not on a spiritual path and pursuing success will achieve their success and yet leave a trail of carnage in their wake. I don't care who I step over. I don't care how much blood I get on my hands. I'm getting there. If we value having the right job, then, and I personally know this one, then you can get lost, and I got lost in the work, and it was all about the work. And you can really skew your perspectives on that. And I'm sure that everyone in this room can think of other examples where status and money and having the hot car, having the arm candy on your arm when you're walking the red carpet, all of that stuff. Many people say that means success. Years ago, there was a TV series called Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. Yes, I see some. And it's interesting because we all wanted to watch this because we wanted to see these rich, successful, famous people. That's another thing, being famous. And again, if your mission, if your success, your measure is being famous, being at the top of the rung, once again, in fact, particularly, that's one where you'll climb over anyone, anytime, anywhere in order to get to the top of the ladder. Now, the other piece about our idea of success is that it has a direct impact on our experience of happiness. And I see this so much. I have done it to myself in the past, where I tell myself a lie that says, when I get this, I'm going to be happy. When I get this promotion, I'm going to be happy. When I make X amount of money, I'm going to be happy. When I buy a home, I'm going to be happy. Just on and on. And again, we've all done that. And here's the thing that is profoundly sad about that notion, is how many people go their entire lives chasing after the carrot on the stick, chasing after what they believe is the key to their happiness. They never get there, and hence there is a feeling of always being not enough, not being there, feeling cheated, feeling that, life isn't fair because you haven't achieved this thing. And how many times have we told ourselves, when I find the right relationship, I'm going to be happy. When I divorce the sucker, I'm going to be happy. When I get this job, I'm going to be happy. Just on and on and on. And as soon as you preface anything with the word when something happens, when is out there somewhere. It will always be out there somewhere. And so you are always, when you're using when statements, you are making your happiness conditional, and you're always putting it just outside your grasp. And that is really sad. I have known people who, at the end of their lives, feel unfulfilled because they didn't achieve, or the when never happened. And that really, that is very, very sad. However, as metaphysicians, as students of the science of mind and spirit, there is a lesson in how we can change our thinking, change our lives. How many times have you heard that? That when we apply spiritual principles in our lives, we must be successful. The caveat to that is that we may have to shift our definition of success. New Thought Dictionary, and this was written in 1942, defines success as fulfillment of legitimate constructive desires, any form of satisfactory self-expression which harms no other person, which is an offshoot of what Ernest Holmes says, and it's one of my favorite quotes. I say it all the time, that if whatever you desire brings more good, more joy, more happiness, and harms no one, and then I'll always add the including yourself, then that is God's will for us. That is what we are here to experience. And that I believe that the universe actually takes on form and experience to support us in those pursuits that are constructive, that bring more goodness into the world and into our own lives. We need to change the yardstick. Now, Deepak Chopra's book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success, I'm going to tell you what the 7 laws are, and then today we're going to focus on the first law because it kind of sets the groundwork for everything else. So he says the 7 spiritual laws, number 1 is the law of pure potentiality. Number 2 is the law of giving. Number 3 is the law of karma, or cause and effect. Number 4 is one of my personal favorites, the law of least efforts. The law of least effort. And the reason it's one of my favorites is because it really flies in the face of the notion that you got to work hard and sweat and struggle in order to accomplish something. I always remind the Quaker prayer, "'Tis a gift to be simple." The next one is, number 5, is the law of intention and desire. Number 6 is the law of detachment. And number 7 is the law of dharma, which is an Indian word for the idea of your life's purpose. And by the way, on our website, I just posted an article that I read last week about the idea of detachment, attachment, and connection. So you may want to check that out in advance of of this, because sometimes we talk about being detached from something, and that can get really confusing. I know I've dealt with that over the years. What is the form of attachment that is not healthy? What is the form of attachment that I need to detach from that is holding me back from my experience of good? So in the law of pure potentiality, basically says that we live in a universe of infinite possibility. Anybody heard that before? How many grains of sand are there on a beach? How many stars in the sky? There are infinite possibilities. How many hairs on your head? I'm just hoping that those do not diminish over time. So that's the only problem I have with that example. And all that says to me is of how infinite life is. I can't wrap my brain around infinite. And that's a good thing. Because that way, for me, all things are possible. Seems like I heard Jesus say that. With God, all things are possible. Seems like I heard that one. And in fact, quantum science is more and more supporting the idea that there's infinite number of particles out there that they take form when we observe them. Is light a particle or a beam? Well, depends. And they've done the experiment. Many of you have heard of the double slit experiment. And basically they shined a light and it showed up as a particle and a beam. And that was directly influenced by what you're looking for. So if you set up the little thing that'll show that it exists as a particle, well, what do you know? It's a particle. If you set it up with the experiment so it shows up at a beam, what do you know? It's a beam. And so what we experience in life is a direct result of our observation of it, our thoughts about it, which a subset of that includes our judgment about it. And so here are three things that Deepak Chopra tells us about how we can participate in the law of pure potentiality. And the first one is about being still. Spending time in the stillness. Now, when I got to the ministers' retreat, we got there on Monday afternoon, and the first session was Monday evening from 7 to 9. And at the conclusion of that session, we were instructed that we were going to spend the next 12 hours in silence. Now, for some people, that can be really, really daunting. For me, not as much, because I do spend time in the stillness every day. Most of the times, for sure, in the morning, and then sometimes also at different points during the day when I have the opportunity of being out in nature. Or remember when I was riding the ferry across from Bremerton to Seattle. I didn't say much at all other than to ask someone to take a picture of me, because then I can just take it in. Okay, so here's the funny story about that. So we're in the silence, and so we were told that we see each other, we just nod, we acknowledge, and it was great, because what happens when you're in the stillness is that you must be in the now. You must be present in the moment. So here's what happened to me. So I'm doing great. I wake up the next morning, oh, this is so great. Set my alarm. I'm not a fan of alarms, but sometimes I have to set them, like Sunday mornings. And I thought that I set the alarm early enough to where I could easily get to breakfast. Because when I'm at these conferences, breakfast is my go-to meal. Protein, brain food, the whole bit. So I'm watching the clock, and I'm running a little behind schedule. And I'm starting to get anxious because this conference, remember I told you before I left that they're saying, hey, stand by. If you've got issues with late nights, get over it. Drink coffee. We had sessions from 9 to 9. Now we had breaks in there. We did have breaks, so I'm not going to let you believe that it was that arduous. But nevertheless, 9 to 9. So clock's ticking. I know I got to get to breakfast. Housekeeping! I stuck my head out the door and went, come back later! Oops. And my roommate is sitting there glaring at me, and I'm just like, ah. And of course, so then I had to beat myself up for a little while. I'm doing better. I am doing better. I don't do it as long. And I look forward to, and I'm probably using a little softer whip. I think the cat o' nine tails is gone. However, what I realized is that the reason I broke the silence is because I was not in the now. My mind was, I gotta get to breakfast, I'm hungry, we're gonna have a long day. I was not in the present moment. So when the knock on the door came, I was not present for that. Because had I been present, as I had been up until that time, I would have taken the moment to remind myself that I was practicing silence, and I would have waved the do not disturb sign at her. So the lesson for me, and of course then we had to go to our morning session, it's like, how did that go? You know, and I shared that I blew it. And the reason I shared is because I got why. Is because I was not being in the present moment. The present moment is the only place where creation takes place. The only place. And so when you are able to be still, as we were told, be still and know that I am God. That means that I am God, an expression of God, a divine being, however you choose to language that. I am that. And when I'm still and when I'm present is when I remember that. It's when I start racing ahead of myself and I am not in the present moment when stuff happens. Now the second way to engage with the law of pure potentiality, and I already touched on it a little bit, is about being in nature. And here's why. If you take the time to look around anywhere, if your thing is the ocean or the river or the forest, yes, even the desert, even though that one kind of is a little beyond me. But, you know, any desert rats in here, it's all good, you know. But to be, and this is what I'll tell you, okay? I did live in the high desert for a couple of years. And what I will tell you reluctantly is that there are some beautiful things in the desert. There's something about how the sun hits the flat land. There's just real intrinsic beauty there, and I hope that my friends and colleagues that are still there are enjoying it. But any place you look, you can see God or the Great Spirit. Again, there is a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and it has many names. It really doesn't much care what name we ascribe to it. And the way that it demonstrates itself to us is in nature. I mean, it's pure. Nature is pure. Nature does not have an agenda, so to speak. Nature is not out there trying to make more money and be successful. Nature is what nature is. And if you look around, you can see all kinds of laws. You can see the law of infinite supply. You can see the law of balance. You can see the law of order and harmony. There are so many things. It's just a matter of noticing. And so for me, oftentimes, 1 and 2 kind of go together. Is that when I am out in nature, I am still. And I do look around. And I do just take in the beauty around me. And Seattle is just very, very, very beautiful place. And one night, as I was coming out from dinner, after the conference was over, I stayed on for a couple of days because I had to make a most holy pilgrimage. So on Friday, I walked from Pike's Market to CenturyLink Field to pay homage to my Seahawks and spend too much money in the pro shop. And while I was walking, it was a beautiful walk because you have the waterfront here, and you've got the city there, and then you can see actually CenturyLink Field and Safeco Field are right adjacent to each other, and it's just beautiful. And I went to dinner, and as I was coming out in the parking lot, I saw the sun was, kind of over here, and it was reflecting off Mount Rainier, and it was just this beautiful pink, purple. It was just majestic. If I'd have been with someone else and just chatting with them, I might have missed that. So being in nature. What does that say to me? Oh, by the way, that says to me about the creativity of the universe. A sunset, or a sunset over the mountain. Just everywhere, all of that beauty, yes, the painted desert. Is all creativity, the creative nature of life. And the third way to practice the law of pure potentiality is to practice non-judgment. And I'll tell you why that is. The minute you label something, you limit it. The minute that you name something as bad, for example, you have just removed the potential or the opportunity for that to be something that is of benefit to you. And so, what if you spent a day and saying, today I shall judge nothing that occurs. And that even includes, see, this is the part that people don't think about, that even includes positive things, like, wow, that's really beautiful. That's a judgment. And, it's like, well, what's so wrong with that? Well, it's just the idea you can look and see where, does that mean if this is beautiful, does that mean that there's something else that's not beautiful? It's an opportunity to be with things as they are and as they are not. It is an opportunity to accept, or as I think it's Byron Katie that says, loving what is. It is what it is. And that's when I use that phrase. Some people use it in a very dismissive way. For me, it's just acknowledging it is. It is what it is. And it's okay. Oops, that's a label, isn't it? It's okay with me. I accept it. So, In order to participate in the abundant giving nature of the universe, in order to access the availability of all goodness, to be open and receptive to it, it's important to spend time in the stillness. Maybe this week, designate an hour or more and be in the silence. And if you happen to be have a partner or a loved one around the house, you can even you can tell them, and then you can even put a sign on that says practicing silence. Some retreat centers do that. Go on silent retreats and they have this little sign that says, I am practicing silence. And so you just know, okay. Number 2, look at nature as the blueprint, as the example of all of the possibilities that are open. And lastly, judge nothing. Allow it to be whatever it is or whatever it is not. And when you do that, then you are allowing it to be something that benefits you. Ernest Holmes had this to say about success. I'm going to close with this quote. I really like it. It says, success means a life free from the burden of anxiety and liberated from the thraldom of fear. There is no successful life without peace or without that inner spiritual certainty which knows that the soul is on the pathway of good, forever expanding into the conscious union of God with man. Once again, the consciousness of oneness, wholeness, and connection is the consciousness that heals. The consciousness of connection is the consciousness that opens the door for infinite source, infinite supply, and infinite experiences of good. Let's pray.